I f***ing convinced you. I could see it in your eyes.
No, thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back to Oz Talks Chelsea. In today's video, we're going to be having a bit of a debate. Enzo Maresca in or out? It's a massively asked question in the Chelsea community at the moment. Now, I sat over here, am fairly Maresca in. A lot of people say I'm too positive, maybe too Maresca in at some points, but we'll see about that today. And fighting the corner of the Maresca out brigade is Louis. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm not too bad. I wouldn't say I'm fighting the corner per se. I'd say I'm more nuanced than some
Okay.
people, but I am far more leaning in that camp than I am yours. Having seen some of your lives on TikTok, I'm like, you are spectacularly positive, and I need to know how you do it. But that's just you, innit?
Well, sometimes if you don't laugh, you'll cry, and I often choose to laugh, and I think the thing with me is I think Frank Lampard getting sacked of his first stint broke me as a man. I think that was my like end of my first ever relationship, and then since then I'm kind of just latching on to things, and I just don't really want to feel that kind of sacking pain anymore. And that's why I'm always now more leaning towards the idea of giving kind of giving managers a bit more of a chance and just seeing what happens. But sometimes that can be detriment to that. So overall, talk to me right now. As we're recording this, we have just beaten Fulham in a really good away day, and we have in a couple of days Everton at home in that 12:30 kickoff. What is your current position regarding where we are exactly right now?
I wouldn't say for a start, for example, that it was a very, very good game against Fulham. It was a good 10 minutes. And I think the
Okay.
biggest problem with Chelsea at the minute is there is a. I'm not going to sit here and speak for everybody. I'm just going to speak about my experience with it. And if people agree with me, fantastic. If they don't, okay.
Hmm.
Um, I just don't feel. You talk about the Frank Lampard sacking breaking you. I just don't feel very connected to Chelsea at the minute. A lot of the stuff that's being said
Okay.
and done, I just don't think. I'm not going to sit here and say. I think it's too cliche and too easy to say something's not very Chelsea, right? Because everyone's
Hmm.
relationship and their exploration and understanding of the culture of Chelsea is different. Um, but for me, if you look at how Chelsea operated and the nature of the beast that it was over the past 40 years, maybe, like I'm talking mid 90s, maybe not 40, but mid 90s, all the way through to the end of the Roman era,
Hmm.
you saw a side which was cutthroat, looking to win, looking to progress, building, having a good understanding of the game as well as a grasp of what it takes to be becoming a more and more of a juggernaut in football. And
Hmm.
now I look at Chelsea, and one of my biggest concerns when this ownership took over was the American corporatization and what that could look
Hmm.
like. And I think a lot of people were a bit like, nah, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Chelsea are already in a good position. Chelsea, as a club, already have all of the assets that they need, just a little bit of tweaking. But naturally, if someone new comes in, they don't want to tweak. And it became, I think, if you look at just American corporates in general, I think one of the best examples
Hmm.
I had was I was speaking to my dad about it, and he was saying a French pen company knows how to sell pens in France. The best at selling pens in the entirety of France, but they get bought out by a massive American conglomerate who go, well, this is how we sell stuff in the States, so this is how we're going to do it. Right now, it doesn't work and it doesn't translate, and we've not
Hmm.
really seen progress. And I've got nuance to that, but obviously I'm sure you're going to want to counter a lot of the points I made anyway. Um,
Hmm.
well, I don't think we made progress. I don't think we've grown. I don't think there's a connection between the important part, all the trifecta, as it were. So the team, the ownership,
Hmm.
and the fans. There is no connection whatsoever. I don't think
Hmm.
anybody's really getting it, and I think it's a real struggle at the minute. And my feelings, I mean, yeah, it's just,
Hmm.
I don't see a team which is cohesive and actually progressing in the right direction. I actually think it's regressing in comparison to the first few months of the season.
Absolutely. So it's results for you that are defining kind of the progression, not the kind of an overall macro kind of view of it.
Mm, it's a bit of both. Okay, so results for me are obviously part of it because football is a
Hmm.
results driven business, but overall, yeah, the macro view, just everything, like the culture has
Yeah.
been completely torn out of the club, and I'm talking down
Mhm.
to not just Neil Bath and the academy teams. I'm talking about people that worked in the marketing department, the people that worked in the
Yeah.
finance department, people that have been at the club for 20, 25 years,
Mm.
who have had a culture and an understanding of what it means to be just walking through the corridors, whether that be in the office at Stamford Bridge or at
Yeah, yeah.
Cobham, where the Americans have
Mhm.
gone, nah, see you later. We don't want to do it like that. And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
there's just no appreciation or cultural understanding.
No, 100%. So bring it kind of more to Maresca, because for me that's a kind of maybe more of an ownership kind of chat for me. With Maresca in terms of results, and the connection there, I think one of my issues with Maresca out as a kind of concept is that a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
will always talk about those first couple of months of the season, and they'll talk about now. I don't see that much difference, compared to the amount of a deal that's been made about it to those times. I think obviously the results were there. I think we have such a young team that you're always going to have dips. We have the youngest team in the Premier League. You're going to have dips in those moments. We've had
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, who's pretty much our only outlet up front, kind of injured, for a period, and we've had Cole Palmer, who isn't necessarily playing awfully, but he's just dropped down in output of goals and assists. In my eyes, the issue with that is, I think I one my statement is not, it's not that, I don't believe it that heavily, but it's kind of like, if you're happy about the way the club is going in November, then I don't think you can be too like drastically the other way now. And I can understand in terms of results, and I understand from your point of view the connectivity with the club. There are some times where I'm like, I was sat there in the Fulham game I was sat on my sofa in the living room at the 80th minute, and I was literally just sunk in my seat, going, "God, what's happening here?" And then the next 10 minutes that followed, I was back to being a Chelsea fan. I was nearly hit my head on the flipping ceiling when we scored. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was back
Oh, yeah.
loving what I love. But that feeling in the 80th minute, it was it was the most feeling that I was like, I'm if this is the spectrum of Maresca in and Maresca out, it was the closest I've been to the middle towards the Maresca outside. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
quite like being on that side. But at the same time, when I look at it overall, I think there is a manager there that is controlling a group of players and circumstances quite well, not perfectly, absolutely not perfectly, quite well. And I can see a young squad getting better over the seasons with more money coming from the ownership. And that's my overall view. There are some moments like 80th minute in
Mm-hmm.
against Fulham, that when we're 2-0 down against Ipswich, I feel lost and I don't know what to do. And I feel a bit like, God, who am I supporting? What is Maresca doing? What's this happening? But I just think there are so many circumstances for Enzo Maresca, such a young manager with such a young team, where I'm like, actually, you're doing an all right job. Actually, you're making some mistakes because you're a young manager. But fundamentally, I think I can see a future with him, and I can see progression. And I guess that difference between us is one of the reasons why you're more out and I'm more in.
I think it also comes down to how you like your football, because I hate this
Hmm.
possession-based football. I despise it. Um, and I also, I mean, when you said I've got more of an ownership problem, unfortunately, the situation stems from the top, and Maresca is a symptom of that
100%.
problem. Um, and the sporting
Hmm.
directors are a symptom of that problem. And you, for example, have said they're such a young squad, bit more money invested. Has the money been invested wisely over the past 3 years? No, not at all. Over 1.5 billion
Not over the
spent.
last 3 years,
Is
no.
that a squad which has actually improved? No, yeah, exactly. So, and that's the thing. So, do you, the issue is, I don't trust these sporting directors, nor do I trust this manager to improve the club, because the style of football is what they've done is they've looked at what City have done rather than looked at
Hmm.
one of the most successful clubs over the past 25 years, by the way, and they've
Hmm.
gone, right, well, City do it like this, so we're going to do it like that, but we're going to do it using
Hmm.
Brighton's model.
Hmm.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
evidence over the past 30, 40 years of football to prove that that doesn't work. Even the class of
So can I
92
ask you a
had
question
senior
in this?
players in it. Yeah.
Yeah. In this management and ownership, they've chosen this way, and this is what we are are
Hmm.
unfortunately or fortunately going to have to deal with.
Hmm.
Is Would another manager be in a different situation to this? Yes, maybe there'd be a different style of football. But at the same time, my question about style of football to you is this not the same? Were we not playing high possession based, exact similar style of football in November, but things were just kind of going our way? When
No,
it's going well, this system, I think it's fantastic. No, you don't think so? Because I think we were.
no, no. I don't think we were at all, Owen. I don't,
Okay.
because the
Yeah.
way Chelsea were playing was, it was
Yeah.
a combination of the back end of Pochettino, and by the way, Maresca's openly stated this. By the way, like when you talk about,
Yeah.
basketball style football, right?
Yeah.
Chelsea were playing what was almost a remnants of Pochettino's football and Maresca's football combined, and I thought it was spectacular. I was at the Wolves game. That was unbelievable football. Like, oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
god,
Yeah.
glorious to watch, because it was
Mhm.
exciting, it was progressive, it was forward thinking, but Chelsea still maintained possession of the ball. That is great football for me. This
Yeah.
passing sideways and backwards, almost with a fear to take somebody on, always got to kind of control the ball, control the game, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It it doesn't work, mate. It doesn't work. You look at Chelsea before the weekend, had won 6 games in 15 in the Premier League since December. On
Yeah. Yeah.
top of that, they
Mhm.
hadn't won away from home since the turn of the year. I
Yeah.
mean, that speaks for itself. And then also being at Legia
No.
Warsaw, I
Yeah.
mean, that, mate, that was, you can't tell me that the quality of football is improving, that it's the same style of play. What's happened now is Maresca's finally got how he wants to do his stuff, where
Mhm.
he then says he wants to excite the fans and do certain things, but he doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to adapt. He's openly admitted he doesn't want to. He
Mhm.
can't adapt. He has his plan, and that's it. You've got the likes of Reece James being inverted and playing in midfield, and we're not getting the best out of him because his best football comes, as we saw in the Fulham game, and later on, as we saw in the previous Premier League game against Ipswich later on, when he wasn't inverting, he ended up kind of sitting on the outside of the box and whipping balls in,
Yeah.
where we've proven to be
Mhm.
his strongest. Maresca's putting square pegs in round holes and expecting
Mhm.
results. And expecting, it's the definition of insanity.
Yeah. My kind of response to that is that I see a team that are creating so many chances, and I look at
Uh-huh.
these kind of moments and I'm kind of like, there was a stat the other day, whether you buy into XG or not, is that Nicholas Jackson is underperforming his XG by such a massive way. Now, if he scored those expected goals, there are so many games where you see like just a goal can absolutely change things. If you're passing around the back 1-0 up, it's completely different to passing around the back when you're nil when it's 0-0 and you need a goal. Do you know what I mean? So that element of control is completely different. For example, that Ipswich game, before we went 2-0 down, Jackson hit the post in the fourth minute, I think it was, and it was a lovely bit of play and everything
Hmm.
was looking great. We score that goal and it's a completely different game. We control the game well. We get to our wingers. They have some decent one-on-one kind of times, and I think the wings are getting better there. Like Cole Palmer is playing awful, and he's a one season wonder now, but he's creating the most chances in the Premier League, up with Bruno
Hmm.
Fernandes every single time today. We're having the most chances. We're creating like some of the most XG in the league. That
Hmm.
can't be passed around the back boring football to me if we're creating those chances. If Jackson had just improved his output by 20 to 30%, I think some people would be having a completely different conversation with themselves. And I think Maresca does have his downfalls, but I think the boringness of the football, to just put it kind of in a simple way, is due to the fact that those chances don't go away because no one complains about passing around the back at 2-0 up. Do you know what I mean?
No, but then we haven't been 2 up for an extensive period now, and I think even we
That's a
were
good
still
point.
passing around the
Yeah.
back and trying to control the game for when we were 2-0 down to Ipswich. There was when Chelsea had
Hmm.
gone behind in every game they've gone behind this season, it's still been the same football. It's just play same game, and when
Yeah.
Maresca talks about games being cup finals but doesn't behave as such, that's an issue. And then, by the way, the other issue I have
Hmm.
with him in terms of the style of football, we talk about the culture and everything around Chelsea. The people sitting in the stands, he talks about wanting to entertain the players and do stuff. It is. I listened to Enzo Maresca in a press conference, and I listened to what he says about wanting to interact with the fans and how he completely contradicts himself constantly, and
Hmm.
um, how there is, like I said, when I talk about the disconnect culturally, the style of football and the way he talks and everything about him is very un-Chelsea. Now, granted, football is changing, and I
Mhm.
maybe am someone who is a bit of a dinosaur in terms of how they like their football. I am not. I appreciate stats and I appreciate data, but it's not the be all and end all.
Mhm.
But unfortunately,
Absolutely.
um, I think I don't know if you listened to Jonathan Wilson did a podcast recently called Liberio, and he was talking about how football is being now owned by technocrats. Basically, you look at the managers.
Mhm.
The coaches were these godlike figures who got teams going through uh, charisma and quirkiness and things
Mhm.
which would bring the players out for those occasions. And there's a balance between that and data towards maybe the
Mhm.
late tens. I think is probably the best balance of it. Now it is completely done by a bloke on a spreadsheet who's seen how Pep
Mhm.
Guardiola's won trophies and he'll talk about controlling the ball and a fear, and it's a fear of losing basically more than the
Yeah.
joy. And I
Mhm.
think for me, a good example is I take the Mickey now, but it's like, do you remember Brazil World Cup? Nike did that advert
Mhm.
where it was the clones versus the actual players taking risks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
That is football now to me. Top level football is
Yeah, yeah.
boring. And the other way to look at this as well, when we talk about a lack of risks, right? This is one of the worst seasons in the Premier League in terms of competitive nature, right? In terms
Yeah.
of the bottom three being relegated, in terms of Liverpool winning the league, and in terms of the rest of the top five race, right? It
Mhm.
is so poor in terms of the quality of football being played and the quality of output that
Mhm.
the fact that Enzo Maresca, with a squad which has had 1.5 billion pounds spent on it, is struggling, by the way, to get into that top five because it's not all the cards are not in our favour here. We've drawn against
Mhm.
Brentford, and he used resting players as an example. Yet proceeds to play a strong team against Legia Warsaw, which still can't beat Legia Warsaw, which uh, doesn't beat Ipswich, and it's the second season in a row where. And this is what I mean about using a balance of data and using your eyes. I'm not saying you don't do that, by the way, but I'm just
Mhm.
saying in general when you
Mhm.
put someone out there, this is the second season in a row that Enzo Maresca's failed to beat Kieran McKenna in 2 games. So
Mhm.
that's something there. Um, the quality of players he has. You talk about Cole Palmer. The reason Cole Palmer has become so or considered a bit one season wonder by some people, which is still ludicrous, by the way, because you raised a good point in terms of his numbers. Um,
Mhm.
he's been put in a pocket. Yeah, I don't know if you saw on the overlap at the end of last season, Glenn Hoddle talking about the sort of player he
Mhm.
is. Using your eyes, and Enzo Maresca's been in football a long time, which is why I don't understand why he's not doing it, right? Cole Palmer is
Mhm.
at his best as a kid in the playground, a lad which is going to get the ball at his feet
100%,
and
yeah.
go, right, give it to me and I'll show you what I can do, right?
Mhm.
Right now, it's, right, Cole, you're in this pocket, you're doing this, and that's it. Limiting our best player, right? You then
Yeah.
also, he's limiting Cole Palmer, and I've already said he's limiting Reece James. Chelsea's two biggest threats, Enzo Maresca has successfully nullified because he wants to play this
Okay.
really
Mm.
pedantic, slow style of football, which is only going to cost Chelsea in the long run. Because, quite frankly, again, looking at the trend of results, you look at the front end of the season and the back end of the season. Chelsea, if you were to put those 15 games before the Fulham game, because I've not got the data since, but those 15 games before
Mhm.
Fulham, if you were to expand that over a Premier League season, Chelsea would be finishing 11th. It's
Mhm.
no better than Graham Potter. So
No,
I
no,
don't look at this
yeah.
and see success and see drive.
Okay. Okay. I do get your points and understand it. I do think maybe disagree with the controlling of Cole Palmer because I think you kind of have to do it, and I don't think any manager in kind of modern football can just give someone that kind of free role. But what I will say is
Well,
a
I've got
couple of
one for you.
questions
Right,
to
I've got
you.
one for you.
Okay, go for it.
Hazard and Sari. Same style of football, but Hazard just did what he wanted. I know Hazard and
It's
Cole
a
Palmer
while
is
ago
very
though.
worlds apart. Football's not changed that much.
It is an interesting one. It is an interesting one, and
I'm convincing you. I can
yeah.
see.
No, you're not convincing me. It's just that that would be too wide for me, and I think to have someone in the middle, the reason the 10 has kind of died out a bit, especially in the Premier League, is you can't just be free flowing in there, in my eyes, like Palmer is. But to kind of wrap this up, I have 2 questions for you. First
Okay.
question is, with how the season ends, what do we need to win or get or not win for you to want to see Maresca in charge next season? Or is there no way at all you do want to see that? And second question regarding that, if we do say goodbye to Maresca, if you were in charge of Chelsea and you sat Maresca, who would you think about bringing in? Or is that maybe your issue of not wanting Maresca fully out because there is maybe no one to bring in?
I have somebody who I'd bring in, and I have what I would do, but the reality is that Chelsea simply won't do that. But it's the most logical and it's the easiest
Like,
step to make to sort of keep
hmm
people happy and also develop a culture. So um, for me, I don't want Enzo Maresca in charge of Chelsea next season. I don't see the value in keeping him. I don't see any growth, and I feel like if you kept Enzo Maresca for the sake of not changing manager, like some people have said, you're just allowing mediocrity to take hold, in my opinion.
hmm
And I think that's something which has been a consistent trend. And again, I think
hmm
Arsenal's a great example of that in the noughties. Young guns, developing side, young players, mediocrity took hold. They're in the middle of moving a stadium though, and winning that money back. So if you
hmm
look at hindsight, Arsene Wenger actually didn't do a terrible job, but that
hmm
project didn't work. And also, Chelsea are not in the middle of moving stadium. Chelsea's finances are the loopholes are running out because of how they're spending
hmm
their money, and they're doing it completely wrong and overspending. Um,
Yep.
my answer of what I'd do is I'd love to see Carlo Ancelotti back at Chelsea. People can say he's old, he's a bit of a dinosaur,
hmm
whatever, blah 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 blah. But just as that maybe 2 3 years stopgap with somebody who he could work with to have that consistent growth, right? Or just to steady the ship and point the people in charge in the right direction. Um, I'd get rid of the sporting directors, and I've said that for months. They said they wanted
hmm
4 windows. They've now had 5. They failed to hit their
hmm
targets again. They failed to see growth. They've not delivered. They need to go, and that's categorical. They should have been gone last summer
Yeah,
because that was an awful transfer window. No one can tell me that was good.
I agree.
Um,
Mhm,
and then but because then there again there are since with the problem. Benedict Barley needs to wind his neck in because he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about, and he needs to stick his nose
mhm,
out and just do what he's good at and leave it at that and leave the running. Um,
mhm,
Todd Bowley is not at fault for most. He's at fault partially. Don't get me wrong, but he's basically been forced further and further and further and further out as Clearleg gone further and further and further and further in. Um,
mhm,
and they're already under pressure because guess what? They're not getting a return because they're failing to do certain things.
mhm,
And they're listening to these sporting directors are completely out of their depth. I'd get one stable sporting director who knows exactly what they're doing, exactly what they're doing. Let them run the show and just go right. Do this. This is how we're going to do it. And I'd bring in Carlo Ancelotti as manager. I'd personally, if it was me, we had the opportunity to bring in the sporting director we should have done. I'd have brought in Luis Campos when we had the opportunity to
mhm,
do so. But unfortunately, the ownership wanted to have more control of the situations. Um, they had no idea about, by the way, as well. Beats me.
mhm,
Um, I'd bring in Carlo Ancelotti because it's a stable figure. It's an older head with more experience that can help these players flourish. And people can say he's a dinosaur and it's not a technocrat, blah blah blah. I don't care.
mhm,
He's a man who's won things, understands football better than most. Um, you then gives you that grace period to figure something out. Um, let these
mhm,
players develop with a manager who knows exactly what they're doing. Leave the football to Luis Campos, who, by the way, is doing the same model at PSG, but is actually doing it successfully.
mhm. Yeah,
That's the young players. That's an example. It's easier in France, whatever,
yeah.
but he's done it successfully because he's been left to his own
Mhm,
devices to do his job because he knows what he's doing. Bring him in, bring in a capable manager who's experienced, get some experienced players through the door, and just let everything kind of balance out. Because and give a clear example, a clear
yeah.
example and a clear
No,
pathway. Because none
yeah.
of that is clear.
So yes, so for you it is you don't want to see Maresca in charge next season, and managerially you're looking at someone like Carlo Ancelotti. I think personally for me, I want stability at my club, and I don't think for me it's accepting mediocrity to want Maresca because I see the good in what he does, and I think he needs to improve. And I like the fact that he's a manager that's young and kind of at the start of this kind of I think him and Chelsea right now are at kind of similar levels of where they are building from the bottom up, and that
Mhm.
is accepting the club is at a lower level than we currently are. And for me, Carlo Ancelotti, I think he said a couple of times the dinosaur comment, but I think him in charge of the youngest team in the Premier League for me doesn't make any sense. Although it would appease the fans, but we can't just do things to make the fans happy. And I just don't think that is going to be the way for me. I obviously as a Maresca in person, want Maresca to remain the manager. But it has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, hearing both sides. Do let us know all your thoughts down below in the comment section. It is a really a heavy, loaded subject, so I would like to hear all your thoughts, and I will make sure to reply to all of them. Go check out Louis' podcast, The Chelsea Echo. I'll be on it hopefully soon. We'll be recording after this. Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.